Hi, I'm Miss Hearn. Let's get started.
Let's graph the equation y equals 1/6 x minus 2 in the rectangular coordinate system. So whenever you graph any kind of equation in the rectangular coordinate system, we want to try and see if we can recognize the shape that we're expecting to get. And in this case, we can see that the variables all have no exponent indicated, which means that the power on each variable is actually a 1, which tells us that this is linear. A linear equation in two variables is always going to give us a line. That's where it gets its name from, linear. Another way of recognizing that this is a linear equation is if you have memorized the slope-intercept form of a linear equation, you can see that it fits that form, y equals mx plus b. So there are several ways to graph linear equations in two variables. The first and simplest way to graph an equation is to plot points. Now, sometimes when the shapes are more complicated or we have more sophisticated ways, we go with those. Well, in the case of a line, it's very easy to graph the line by plotting points because we know that it only takes 2 points to determine a line. So if we can find two pairs of coordinates, we have the shape that we're looking for. So I'm going to draw my XY chart, and we have a lot of flexibility here, and don't let that intimidate you. This is a good thing. This means we can pick any x values we want because every x value has some corresponding y value that would give us a pair of coordinates. So I like to pick points that are easy to plug in. What do I mean by that? Well, notice that the first thing we're going to have to do when we plug a value into y equals 1/6 x minus 2, the first thing that we're going to have to do when we plug in an x value here is to multiply x by 1/6, or in other words, divide it by 6. But we want to choose x values that are easy to divide by 6. For example, the number 6. So the first x value that I'm going to choose is 6. Another x value that's easy to divide by 6 is 0. And another x value that would be easy to divide by 6 is -6. Now you could also pick 12, 24. Anything that x goes into evenly is a good pick. I chose 3 x values rather than 2 because it's kind of a parity check, and what I mean by that is if they line up, I'm pretty sure I got them right. But let's go ahead and plug those in and solve for y, starting with x equals 6. So I'm plugging it into the equation. 1/6 times 6 minus 2 is going to be my y value. 1/6 times 6. A sixth of 6 is another way of saying that, is going to be 1. And you can see that because this 6 in the denominator cancels with the 6 in the numerator. We're left with y equals 1 minus 2, which is -1. So my first y value is -1. Now let's plug in x equals 0. So we have y equals 1/6 times 0 minus 2. Anything times 0 is 0, but y is 0 minus 2, or just -2. My second y coordinate is -2. Now let's plug in x equals -6. So we have y equals 1/6 of -6 minus 2. The only difference between 1/6 of 6 and 1/6 of -6 is the sign. It's going to be a negative when you multiply two different signs. So -1 minus 2, which gives us a y value of -3. So let's take these 3 pairs of coordinates and plot them. So I have my points that I want to plot, and I'm going to draw my xy coordinate system, and I'm going to label my axes based on the fact that the largest values in these pairs of coordinates are 6's, using a scale of 1 unit per mark. I'm going to plot my points. Now remember that the first coordinate is always the x and the second coordinate is always the y. X-axis being horizontal, y-axis being vertical. So to plot 6, -1, our starting point is always at the center, and we're going to go 6 to the right and then down 1 unit, and here we have the point 6, -1. It's always good to label your coordinates, so I'm going to write that on here. And now let's plot 0, -2. 0 in the x coordinate means we're not going to the right or left, we're just staying in the center of the graph. -2 on the second coordinate, the y coordinate, tells us to go down 2. Here we have 0, negative 2. Now that's enough to draw my line, but I've chosen to graph one more point just to make sure, because if I get something that looks like a triangle instead of a line, I know I went wrong somewhere. So negative 6, negative 3. Let's see if it lines up with what we would expect. So negative 6 in the x coordinate means we're going to go to the left 6, and then negative 3 in the y means we're going to go down 3 units. That would be about here. Negative 6, negative 3. And that does look like it lines up, so I think we did a good job. So there's the graph of y equals 1/6 x minus 2.